Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Sherborn Board of Selectmen meeting of November 10th, 2016. We'll call the meeting to order and ask if our Town Administrator, Dave Williams, would read through the agenda, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, we'll vote to approve or amend the agenda. And we have one amendment tonight, and that's to remove the consideration of registrar appointments. That's not going to be needed. And then public comment period. I didn't see anyone signed up. And then announcements, recognition awards for volunteers. And I'm going to read their names. Alex Dowse, Beatty Dowse, Jonathan Dowse, Arthur Shore, Brad Van Brunt, Carol McGarry, Jack Mulhall, Joseph Meany, Kitty Sturgis, Peg Robinson, Rick Novak, Sue Pierce, Tom Ernston, Susie Wheelwright, and Warren Wheelwright. And then on-site insight, Stephen Nino's update on capital needs assessment and consideration of reserve fund transfer request for library project. Then George Fisk from the Sherborn Rural Land Foundation will be here and talk about an agricultural preservation restriction that he's looking for Board of Selectmen approval. And then an update on the finance director accountant hiring. And then under routine business, we have Town Administrator report, Selectmen reports, a meeting calendar setting the next meeting of November 16th, and executive session to discuss strategy with respect to litigation where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the town's litigation position, and the chair so declares pursuant to MGL Chapter 30, Sections 21A3, with respect to the following pending case, Conservation Commission versus the Fields of Sherborn. To comply with or act under the authority of General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 22, to review the minutes of executive sessions pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, and we'll plan to go into executive session, not to return to open session.
Great, thanks, David. And so we've got no public comment, and we started a little bit late, so it is 6:10, and we can go to the proclamations, the volunteer recognitions, and I see there's a great crowd here for that too, which is nice. Our tradition here is to have Paul do the honors of reading the certificates and handing them out. And when you hear your name called, if you'd come up, we'd like to present you with a certificate and thank you for your service to the town.
I see some names who aren't here. Are
Carol McGarry isn't going to, can't make it, so she notified me today. Sue Pierce notified me that she can't make it. And I'm not sure about Brad. He called me today, he was going to try and make it. And I don't believe that Rick can make it.
But what about the Dowses?
I got an email today from Alex that he would be here.
Okay, so maybe we'll hold them out till the end.
I'll do the people who are here.
Okay.
And then hopefully by the time we get to the end. So the Board of Selectmen wants to recognize long-serving volunteers of the town. We very much appreciate the service to the community. We have all benefited, the entire community has benefited from the service of so many good volunteers. So roughly once a month, we designate some of the leading volunteers based on the numbers of years of service. This will be our third time that we are recognizing volunteers. We'll start with Kitty Sturgis. Kitty has served on the following boards and committees: Library Trustee, Board of Assessors, Fence Viewer, Map Study Committee, Board of Appeals, Sign Bylaw Committee, Selectmen, MBTA Advisory Board, Tree Policy Committee, Tree Warden, Advisory Committee, Elder Housing Committee, Sherborn Governance Task Force, and Groundwater Protection Committee. Kitty?
That's a lot of committees.
Next is Joe Meany. Joe Meany has served on the following boards and committees: the Elderly Housing Committee, the Elderly Housing Study Committee, the Sherborn School Committee, the Elderly Housing Action Committee, the Sherborn Housing Partnership, Traffic Safety Committee, Town Office Renovation Committee. George Meany, thank you for your...
Joe Meany. Thanks very much.
Next is Peg Robinson. Peg Robinson has served on the following boards and committees: the Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee, the Bay Circuit Implementation Committee, the Open Space Committee, the Recycling Committee, the Town Forest Committee, Traffic Safety Committee, and the Town Beautification Committee. Peg Robinson, thank you for your service.
Diane, I appreciate Hey, we're looking for your certificate right now. Is anybody saw it? Maybe I'm missing it when I go through. Maybe we gave you a certificate. Yeah, you look. You're better looking than I am. That's okay. It's there with. Thank you for the service. You was here? You get stuck to the back of 101.
I think you might have two, actually.
Kitty has two? Thank you, Kitty, for carrying that back to Peg.
Well, Kitty's the snow one. I bet it says Peg Robinson. It does.
There we go.
Signed?
We need some more signatures.
Oh, it does? Yeah, that one must have just gotten stuck. I'm going to go grab that from him. Bring it back up.
We stole one off the houses game.
That's what we were doing. Perfect.
Paul didn't sign.
Paul didn't sign yours? That's unacceptable.
How many missing on
I
that?
didn't sign.
Just you.
Next, let's do the Douses.
Oh, you want to take this in, Ma?
We'll take it in mass.
No, we'll do them.
First, Alex Dowse has served the town on the following boards and committees: the Growth Policy Committee, the Fire Department, Middlesex County Advisory Board, Police Chief Search Committee, Right to Know Municipal Law Coordinator, Fire Garage Building Committee, and Conservation Commission. Alex, would you step forward? Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Alex.
And one of your relatives is
There's a few of them.
Yeah, there are a few of them looking down on us.
Next is John Douts, serving the town on the following boards and committees: Tri-County Regional School Committee, Pine Hill Secondary Access Committee, Tree Warden, Historic District Commission, Agricultural Commission, Forest Warden. Jonathan Douse, please step forward.
Thank you, sir. Somehow the fire department didn't make it work. Should be known.
You still got the sweatshirt.
Betty Dowse. Betty Dowse has served the town on the following boards and committees: Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee, School Building Planning Committee, Regional School District Planning Committee, Tri-Group, Pesticide Study Committee, Bicycle Committee, the 1858 Townhouse Study Committee, the Town Forest Committee. Betty Bell. Thank you for your service to the town.
You probably did get a couple. Congratulations, Betty. And thank you.
Thank you. Boy, thanks, Betty.
You know where you stand.
Yeah. I
Okay, so now we're down to Rick Novak, who's not here.
Carol, Sue, Jack Mulhall.
Oh, Jack's,
There you go.
yeah, he's at the bottom of
Okay,
the
Jack
page.
Mulhall served on the following boards and committees: the Recycling Study Committee, the Recycling Committee, Solid Waste Advisor, the GIS Study Committee. Jack?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jack. Great.
Good scout.
Okay, who else?
Art Schnur.
Arts, yeah.
Art Schnur, I saw him, served on the following boards and committees: Conservation Commission, Groundwater Protection Committee, Bay Circuit Implementation Committee, Open Space and Recreation Plan Implementation Committee, Forest Management Study Committee, GIS Study Committee, Groundwater Oversight Committee, Land Acquisition Committee, Planning Board, Ad Hoc Road Committee, Revenue Enhancement Committee. Art Schnorr, thank you for your service to the committee.
Also a great trail guide.
Art. Do we have anybody else?
I don't see the rights.
All right, so we have several others, and you want to read them anyway, Paul?
Mike,
Yep.
isn't it Susie?
Oh, Susie is here.
Susie is here.
Susie, you were being...
No.
No? Susie's not here.
That's Mary.
Oh, Mary's here.
Similar hair. Should I do compliment? That looks the same.
And I couldn't see you, so...
Brad
believe
Van
anything.
Brunt.
Brad.
Brad,
Brad, we're getting through this.
just in time.
Brad, don't sit down.
Don't even sit down.
Brad Van Brunt is being recognized for his service on the following boards and committees: Traffic Safety Committee, Western Avenue Committee, and the Ad Hoc Road Committee. Brad, please come forward.
You have to stay. You can get in and out in under a minute.
Well done.
Perfect. Getting out of here quick. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Brad.
So,
Got a few-
should I?
Yeah, you might as well read the others, because we're going to just have them...
Okay. We also want to recognize the following individuals who could not make it here today: Rick Novak. Rick is being recognized for his service on the Sherborn Housing Partnership, the Planning Board, the Sign Bylaw Committee, and the Board of Appeals. Carol McGarry. She is being recognized for service.
Carol McGarry and Sue, Carol McGarry's coming to another meeting. She didn't want hers tonight.
Okay. Sue Pierce.
Sue
Hold.
Pierce, we can give her, she just couldn't make it tonight.
Okay, Sue Pierce is being honored for service on the following boards and committees: Library Trustee, Recycling Committee, and Council on Aging. Susie Wheelwright is being honored today for service on the following boards and committees: the Sherborn School Committee, Fire and Pond Policy Review Committee, Historical Commission, Open Space and Recreation Plan Implementation Committee, Farm Pond Advisory Committee, Open Space Committee, Town Beautification Committee, Historic District Commission. Warren Wheelwright is being recognized for the following service to the town: Metropolitan Area Planning Council, Planning Board, Land Acquisition Committee, North Main Street Design Review Committee, Board of Selectmen, Conservation Commission, Community Preservation Act Study Committee, Town Beautification Committee, Ad Hoc Road Committee, Communications Committee, Tree Warden, Western Avenue Intersection Committee. For Warren, Susie, Sue, and Rick, thank you for your service to the town. I wonder if we could get all of today's recipients to stand up for a round of applause to you.
It's great. This is
Just to add
a nice time.
one thing, most of the folks that received the awards tonight have served the town between 20 and 25 years. I think for Betty it's even longer. And I bet this list is almost complete, but I'm sure we've missed some because of the period of time. I mean, it's an amazingly long period of service, so.
Yes. And thank you all. So what do we have next? Register appointments is off. We've got On-Site Insight is our next presentation.
A while back, we had put forth paperwork to enter into a community compact. Part of that community compact was for capital planning, and we started focusing on fleet management, and roadway management, and building management. And with those funds, we hired an outside consultant to come in and review several town buildings, and Diane has been working with Steve to come up with these final recommendations. Right now, we're moving these recommendations into the master capital plan that would be moving forward to you for consideration. We would then use these as the backup detail information. So we'll just turn it over to Steve and Diane for this section.
Great.
No, not that one? Okay.
All right. Ready? Very good. Thank you.
So we'll just go through, probably the best thing is just to explain how, the best way to read this really.
Okay.
We'll do that. So what we did is we looked at 5 buildings: the town hall, this building, the 2 fire stations, the police station, and the CM&D building. And really what these reports are simply is just a comprehensive collection of what is at each building, how old is it, what the typical life of that element is, and when should it be replaced or repaired based on the life and current condition. So that's really all this is. It's a complete collection of everything at the building. Now, what I mean by, replacement or repair, boilers need to be replaced, windows need to be replaced, roofs need to be replaced. You're not going to replace the brick in this building. So what we show is periodic allowances to repoint, repair brick. You're not going to replace all the concrete at a site. So periodic allowances to repair, crack fill, sectional replace. So it's sort of a mix of replacement needs and maintenance needs based on typical expected useful lives. So the report simply, that's just the first page is just an overview of the building, the square footage, which comes into play because we take, of all the costs we have, the total costs we have, we divide it by the square footage, and it's really only for comparison. So you can go from building to building to building and see what the per square foot cost of the needs are at each building, and you can compare that way. And I also use it in the replacement reserve section, the finance part of the report, in terms of what to put away per square footage in order to cover the needs. This is the narrative, which is just basically, a word narrative of all the detail, the numbers in the back. So I'm not going to go through this. It's sort of, if you're in the back, which is where I'm going to go back here, which is where all the detailed numbers are, if you want more explanation, you could just go to the narrative and find that section and just, get a little bit more information, more detail. And then there's a photograph section, so each report has photos of the entire site, the building, everything that we looked at. A lot of the pictures are just what is there, so you can see what's there, what the current condition is. Some things I point out, other pictures are, issues that we're seeing. So, a lot of this is granite post mounted globe style CFL fixtures, corrosion, cracked globes, and one entirely missing fixture were noted during the assessment. So putting out some issues. Others, it's just what's there. View of the development's septic leaching field located at the south end of the property. Just showing you what is there. These are the mechanical, and what the photos, the order of the photos is the order of our sections of the different parts of the report. So there's site section, then there's boilers, then there's building mechanical. So the boiler room is just what's in the boiler room. Then we have a separate building mechanical, so it's the compressors that are outside or, different other mechanical elements of the building that are not in the boiler room. So here's the boiler area, here's the mechanical section, the generator, the main disconnect panel, fire alarm panel, the server room, this is the hydraulic elevator machine. And then we get to the building architectural, which is the exterior of the building, and pointing out different issues noted on the exterior, and just condition issues. Okay, and then we get to the interior of the building, and basically, again, just pictures of what's there or issues noted, the cracking that's upstairs in a couple of the rooms. And then that's it. So the meat and bones of the report starts here. Okay? Again, a lot of information here. There's 45 pages of information, but it's detailed out, it's line by line, and really this is where you want to go to get the detail. And again, just like I said before, basically it's what's there. This is the first item, roadways and parking, which is the asphalt. How much of it is there? 22,500 square feet. $225 is the cost to scarify and resurface. If you want to do just dig up the entire roadway, redo the base, then it would be more. But typically you don't do that if, you don't have any issues with the base. So $225 a square foot is the typical cost to scarify and resurface, which is just taking off the top layer, putting up a new layer back down. It's currently 50 years old. The expected useful life is 20 years. Subtract the 2, so you replace it in year 5. That's all it is, just simple math. 22,000 square feet times 225, total cost would be 50,000 square feet, and $50,000 doing it in year 5. This is the schedule, which is basically, I'm showing doing it all in year 1. I could change that to a 2. And what we'd take is take the 50,000 and split it up over 2 years. Sometimes people, properties do that. They'll just do one section 1 year, one section the next. And then this is just a little bit of a note. Asphalt paved roadway with adjacent parallel perpendicular parking stalls, varying conditions, spot wear, and pitting, future cost to scarify and resurface. So all this is just, this is the year by year by year, the 20-year plan of where is the cost going to go and what is the cost going to be in that year, which is going to be different than this cost because what we do is we inflate the cost at 3% per year. From year 1 to 2 to 3, is inflation really going to go up 3%? No, but over the course of 20 years, we're figuring the average is going to be about 3%. So when you look at the 20-year total of all your site issues, the 20-year total of your mechanical issues, then you're going to hopefully come up with a pretty accurate total cost over 20 years. So doing it in year 5, doing it all in year 1, there's the cost, $56,000, again inflated from that $50,000. All right. Now, what do you do in the interim? Typically in the interim, you're going to do some maintenance. So this is basically just showing previous crack filling, maintenance evidence, some spot pitting visible, periodic cost to continue asphalt maintenance repairs, crack filling, seal coating, restriping. So here's that total amount again. Typically about 20 cents a square foot, which is about $4,500. So that's showing year 1, 10, 15, 20. Why not year 5? Because we're resurfacing in year 5, so you're not going to do maintenance in that year. So this is just interim maintenance, which is crack filling, seal coating, restriping the parking stalls. And there you see the costs for that, again, inflated. And it just goes down through the site. You've got almost 1,000 square feet of concrete walkways and ramps. Here, again, all we do is we just take 10% of that and say, about every, 11 years or so, you're going to do some concrete repairs at about 10%. And this is really where, you guys can have input. No, in our experience, we've usually had to do more. We've usually had to do, 15 or 20%. And that's where adjustments, can be made. That, Diane and I had conversations back and forth. Hey, can we adjust this? Can we move this forward? Can we move this back? This is based on typical experience of what properties do. I went to a property out near Worcester that had serious issues with the concrete that was originally laid. It just wasn't done right. So they do concrete repairs at much more frequency. So it really depends on the historical issues at that particular property. So this just goes down through the site. This is your site distribution systems, which is the gas lines, sanitary lines. You really don't really have any typical costs related to those. You get to the leaching fields. Again, this is a cost to rebuild the field after 25 years. This is the Yeoman submersible pump, which is actually down in that corner, in that room there. Typically, 20-year useful life, 15 years old, you would replace it in year 5. Then the boilers, you've got a really nice Buder's Logano high-efficiency boiler downstairs. They're lots of mid-efficiency, 82%. Those we typically give a 25-year useful life. And remember, this is based on a typical useful life of a boiler of that size. That boiler could go tomorrow. So this plan is based on typical useful lives, always knowing that things are going to happen, which is really why you want to do these every 5 years. Acts of God, premature failures. After 5 years, this whole plan could change based on things that happen that aren't expected to happen. So that's why we kind of, do suggest every 5 years to bring it up to date. We can see issues that have happened that weren't expected to happen and adjust the report accordingly. So this is all everything in your boiler room and what your typical replacements are going to be. Here's an example of spreading the costs out two heating water loop pumps. These are the pumps that basically pump the heating water through the building to all the different units, Fenkel units. Typically have a 20-year useful life. Are you going to replace them both exactly at the same time? Probably not. So you spread the costs out, do one a year. So you'll see that this $2,850 for each one is a total of $5,700. Here's one pump one year, here's the other pump next year. So all this number here is just, like I said, spreading out what the total cost is. Then building mechanical and well water system. These are all the different components with that. You're building electrical, which is your generator. And let's see. Now the generator, it's only 15 years old. So would you normally replace it? No. However, as explained, it's significantly undersized and doesn't really do what it needs to do. And I guess you guys have some, pretty frequent power outages. And it was sized to do just very limited life safety coverage. So that's why we're showing year one, because they did already get a proposal to replace it. So again, not only is this a report of what's there, but based on this particular property, there may be things being replaced earlier because of other, issues, this is one example. And they gave me some proposals. So these costs are actually actual costs based on the proposals that were already obtained. Smoke fire alarm, again, this one only 15 years old, but based on input from Diane, I'm showing replacement year one. And here again, are you going to do everything exactly as timed as I'm showing here? Probably not, no. But this basically gives you an idea of what is there, what the general replacement timing, should be or, might be, and whether you do it in year one or whether you decide to push it off and do it in year 5, the cost is still in there. The total costs are still in there, whether you're doing them in the timing that I show or, pushing them off or something, maybe even doing them sooner. Here's your elevators. Pretty good size cost, but remember, it's only 15 years old. Elevator machinery typically lasts 30 years, so you're not doing it out until year 15 and 20. And this is just basically the hoistway. When an elevator is gone for about 30 years, a hydraulic elevator, you've got that big piston, going up and down for 30 years, there's going to be issues with it. There could be scoring. So this is a typical cost for dealing with the hoistway, piston, door, car equipment.
Did you take usage into account? I mean, our elevator here probably goes up and down far less frequently than one in an office building.
Yeah, which is why for this I did 35 years, but the elevator machine I did 30 years. And again, you talk to different people, they'll say, oh my God, our hydraulic elevator lasted 35 years. We had to replace ours after 25 years. There's such, play depending on usage or other issues. It could be a lemon, just like a car. You could get a lemon boiler, you could get a lemon elevator machine. So, again, typical EUL, but you may eke out a few more years. You may have to replace sooner, just depending. But like I said, the cost is there. So at least you're planning for the expense, because within those 20 years, the expense is in there and you're planning for it. And that's the key thing, is you're planning ahead for the expenses that might be coming up or will be coming up eventually on each building. Now you get to the exterior, and furniture store, again, typical 35-year life, doing it year 20. The power door openers, typical 15-year life, so those are there. Here's the exterior walls. Like I said, you're not going to replace a brick, but you're going to do typical periodic repointing, as needed brick repairs, replacement. Here again, just take about a 10%. 10% at $15 a square foot. So every 9 years. Every 9 years, you're doing typical exterior maintenance repairs, and there's your costs. Roofs. When we get to the interior spaces, walls, all it is just a painting cost per square foot for painting. This is that right there, the folding door. Typically, you'd get 20 years out of it, but Dan reported that there's issues closing it, opening and closing it, which may be due to maybe some settling, because that's a long span. And so I'm showing that in year one, only because of the fact that it didn't last as long as a typical EU well. And again, you guys can say, it's not too bad, you know, let's wait another couple years on that. So, but this really is based on input, you know, from Dan about the issues with the wall. And a lot of the interiors is basically just the, you know, the painting and the flooring. Typical life for carpet is 10 years. Typical life for VCT is 15 years. And same thing with the stairs. And then the lobby, staff room, kitchen. Again, just the painting, the flooring, the cabinets. We're doing the cabinets in 5 years. The offices, ceilings, carpet, VCT. Here's an allowance for office cabinets and cabinet work in about 5 years. Not doing it all at once, but basically here's a lump sum, a good chunk of money, and spread out over 5 years for as needed periodic gradual replacement of the case work, which there's a lot of here. Another allowance for office equipment. Here I'm doing $10,000 every 5 years, rather than just one gradual replacement like I'm doing the case work. Office equipment, computers, printers, things like that. This equipment up here, audiovisual equipment. Then downstairs in the society office, same issues, and then the restrooms. So that's all the detail. How can you sort of like an easy one-shot look at all this detail? That's what the capital needs summary is, which is on page 27, 28, 29. This is just a one-shot look at all of your year one costs. Here's all your site system, which is that first long section we looked at, all summed up. This is the boiler room, all summed up. This is the building mechanical. And this is all your building architectural, all summed up. So you can quickly see what are our costs in year one, where are the major costs. Some on the site, you have nothing in the mechanical room because a lot of that equipment is fairly new and you're not going to really have any replacements for a few years. But a lot of building mechanical and a fair amount of building architectural. Not much in year two, not much in year three, year four. Then you've got some more costs coming up, pretty significant in year five. So that's all this is just an easy way to quickly look at what's parts of the plan do we have large costs. This is just a visual of these 2 pages. So you can quickly see, all right, what do we got here? The blue is building architectural, the yellow is building mechanical, and you got a little bit of site. So you can quickly just visually see what are the major things coming up and what are the specific sections, I guess you could call them. So this is the year to year to year. This is just a visual of all your year one costs. This is taking 1 to 10. So it's adding up all your costs from years 1 to 10 for each section. And that's what this pie chart is. Over the 10 years, you've got a pretty even split between the mechanical and the architectural. And this is your site system, this is your mechanical room. This is your 20-year costs, all 20 years. And what we show is, this is in current dollars, okay? So $1,084,000, that's everything in that plan, all the costs, all added up over 20 years, but not inflated. So if you did it all at once, all of it at once, it'd be $1,084,000. This is your inflated cost. So if you did it according to the plan, over the course of 20 years, we're estimating that that's what the total cost would be, accounting for inflation. So that's all that is. Now, how do you financially plan for it? So here's your total costs year by year by year. What we then show on the next page is a hypothetical, and I'm stressing hypothetical. This is, this is a way of being able to fund. And
We're
what
only
this is,
talking about one building here,
right, we've got separate
There's
reports
another-
for each one.
$600,000 in the first year.
What's that?
So there's another $600,000 of other things and other buildings.
Right, there's the other four reports, yeah. We did 5 total. And they're all laid out exactly the same. So you can take, you can take these numbers, put them in a spreadsheet or whatever you want to sort of get a total of everything. So, starting out with 0, we call them reserves. A lot of times municipal buildings don't have a reserve account. Reserves are really sort of more for residential properties, condominiums, apartment buildings have replacement reserve accounts. You've got an operating budget, which we don't put in this plan. We don't put any operating costs in this plan. It's separate. The day-to-day operating costs. This is strictly capital needs. So they'll have a replacement reserve budget. So assuming 0 here, what we're doing here is showing that if you put $6 per square foot, okay, $6 per square foot, which you multiply the square foot of the building, you get $87,700 as your starting reserve funding for that year. We're doing interest on reserves at 2%. Again, that's averaging out over 20 years, remember. Of course, you're not getting that now, but, and that can be adjusted. This number can be adjusted. And so you're estimating 870. This is your total capital cost for that year. You're still at a negative. So this is just a year 1 input of getting over that hump, getting over the hump of the large cost in year 1. If I had just tried to do it all in just a per square foot, contribution, it just got to be too huge. The graph just went exponentially large. So it's a combination of just that first infusion of being able to get past those year 1 needs, and then this is just basically a lot of sort of going back and forth and look at what the graph does. That covers your needs for year 1 and year 2. Then if I just left it at that, again, the graph just went exponentially huge. So at that point, since you've covered those immediate needs in year 1 and year 2, you could drop the annual contribution to the reserves by $3 a square foot, and you're good pretty much for the rest of the 20-year plan. So all this is showing is now you're down, what it originally at 6, now I'm down to 3. So I was originally doing $6 a square foot, 87 plus that outside contribution to get me over the hump. Next year I'm doing the same thing. I've got 110,000 funds available. My capital cost, this is from the summary of all the pages. My capital cost for that year are only 500, so there's plenty left over. All right, that 109 goes back up. This is our beginning of the next year. And then again, didn't need to do the $6 a square foot. It just wasn't necessary. So that's where we dropped it to 3. So now the $3 per square foot, we're only putting in 46,000. Total funds available, minus the capital cost for that year. We're still in good shape back up to this year. And what happens is, because there's not a lot of cost, what you're doing is you're building year by year by year, planning for the next year where you've got some significant costs. And that's what happens in year 5. In year 5, you've got some significant capital costs, but you've built up your reserves to be able to cover them. But now, you've dropped back down to a pretty low reserve. But then there's not a lot of huge expenses and you're building up again until your next big costs in year 15, which I think are probably mechanical. Yeah, year 15 are some building architectural and mechanical issues.
So you've if you go back to the slide you were working from before, yeah, that one. Do you reflect the cost of the capital you borrowed in the first year as part of the cost for the reserve fund?
It's not borrowing.
I thought you were borrowing.
Just taking it.
No,
just
we're just
free
basically,
cash.
all I'm showing you, I'm showing you where you're going to get it. It's basically just saying this is,
Okay, so
an amount that you should contribute.
So we're just taking it as a straight contribution.
Right.
Into a
So-
stabilization account. We create a capital stabilization account that other communities have done, and then each year we transfer money from free cash to the stabilization account. We'd aggregate all the buildings together into one
Right.
stabilization account, but the law allows us to create separate stabilization accounts for each building. If you wanted to have one for the town hall, you could have one for the town hall. But typically, communities put them all together into one stabilization and use the treasurer and others to keep an account of the source of, and what was intended to be spent when. But the alternative that we've been doing here in our community is, well, we haven't done the planning, so before I say what we've been doing typically, but it's good to foresee where the expenditures are going to be rather than wait for a boiler to fail and then be running around saying we got to have a reserve fund transfer, we got to try and get to town meeting, can we put a Band-Aid on it?
Yeah.
But typically what we've been doing is that we do a override, a debt exclusion override for each year's actual expenditures. So we would do, like in year 5, we don't really save up money. We wait till year 5, then we go to the voters and we say, here's the expenditures that we're going to do in this year, whatever the total is. We ask the voters at town meeting to appropriate that with a borrowing, basically. And if they approve the borrowing, then we have the money to do that piece of it. The funding gets paid out through the bond, a little bit each year gets paid back to the lenders. So we operate off credit.
Right.
Your method is to save
Right.
it first and operate off savings.
Yeah.
Well, look, so I'll go back to my question though. You had in year 1 a number of $87,000, but the real year 1 number that you're recommending is actually 331 plus 21. It's 352,000. Why don't you
Right, to be able to
why don't
cover
you just
all
put
these.
352,000 as the reserve contribution? Because if it's outside capital, we're either borrowing it or we're putting it
Right,
into the fund.
we did initially, and then actually I was talking to.
I'm just saying it's a little misleading like that if you're not talking about borrowing.
Yeah,
from
like
outside
actually, you know
capital.
what? I can show you. So, I actually did it initially, and then one of the assessors during the report review, every report is reviewed by another assessor, and they said, well, typically you really want to show sort of a per square foot amount because they don't want to, get a huge loan to cover 20 years worth of needs. And that's a lot of times what we typically do on, a residential building is show
I'm not talking about covering 20 years of needs. I'm talking about covering your first year of needs, right? So you told us the first year we need 300 and something thousand, I think.
right. So what we can do is, so basically, if I took these out,
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to do the spreadsheet now. I'm just
No,
it's
so-
more of a
so-
concept.
so that's your idea is basically just doing a lump sum to get over that amount.
I'm just saying you've set up a reserve account, but you're only funding it with a quarter of what you need in the first year, and you have this magic outside capital that Paul tells me is not borrowing, it's a reserve fund transfer. Well, if it's a reserve fund transfer, it's still our money that's going into
Right.
an account to use for capital. So why don't we just say that? The first year is going to cost $300 and something thousand. Because if you say it's going to cost $80 something thousand, and there's this outside capital
Yeah.
that's coming from someplace else, that's not really what it's going to cost. It's going to cost $300 and something thousand the first year. Then it's going to cost 80, and then it's going to cost 40.
Yeah, and
a
it
year.
depends on what you look like. I can do this as all reflection on this. This is just one way. Like I said, I stress hypothetical at the very beginning.
Yeah, I'm more objecting
So-
to the words outside capital, because that, if Paul's telling me that's not supposed to be borrowing, I don't know really what it is,
I mean-
other than funding.
No, it
I
can
can
be
change the
borrowed.
terminology in this as well.
No, it's
you know.
it's a policy question, it's not a critique of your
Yeah.
report, it's just a question of sort of how we're gonna show it to the public without
Right.
misleading them that there's some magic way that in the first year, when we have $300,000+ of deferred maintenance, we only have to put $80,000 in a reserve fund. Yeah, that's right, you do, as long as you're willing to borrow $260,000, or as long as you're willing to transfer $260,000 out of operating budgets and other town budgets to go to this capital expense. So we're either going to borrow it. It's free cash isn't free, Paul. I mean, it's still money from the budget. So we're either going to borrow it, or we're going to take it out of the budget in year one, or put it into the budget in year one and spend it. But it's not. I'm not objecting to the fact that you used it for your example as outside capital, but it's not really outside capital, because there's no, magic Mr. Moneybags who's going to give us a outside capital gift to fix our town hall, unless there is. And if
No,
you're,
typically,
if
like,
you're out
this-
there, feel free to give us that.
Every building differs. Like if it's a
Donation.
condominium building, the outside capital would be a loan that they would get, or an assessment.
When I
So-
said borrowing, Paul
that's-
jumped in and said no. So we either have a dispute up here about whether we're going to borrow, or we're going to find $260,000 some other way.
terminology be adjusted, or the way you want to show this could be adjusted. You can just
Yeah, no, I get it. It's a lot of work, and it's pretty clear.
Just
the way you
plug a
do it.
zero into outside capital, and I think we're all set.
Yeah, there. So
I didn't mean to say no borrowing. I said that's the way we've been doing it, is to, advisory committee recommends debt exclusion. We put it on the ballot, and the voters have been supporting us on those kinds of things.
I think what you said was reserve fund transfer.
Last year, we also used some from general revenues to pay for capital. That was when we switched to fair budgeting.
Right.
We're now allowing annually a certain dollar amount that's going to go to capital items.
So that's perfect.
And we also have used free cash for capital items as well. Which, free cash, like you said, I should say, free cash is a misnomer, as you said, Mike. It's really undesignated.
Yeah, it's still, it's basically present year tax money, isn't it?
Previous year tax.
Previous year, no, one year previous, yeah.
But Mike, don't forget, you don't have to borrow that 300,000 as a long-term bond. We could borrow it short-term, and then each year when we bring in the 87, pay off a larger
course.
amount because the expenses.
That's what I would expect you to do.
You're 100% right.
That's why I was kind of surprised when I said it's borrowing, that wasn't
You borrow
borrowing.
330
I know.
for 1 year, 220 for,
That would be
2 years.
that would be my sense of how you'd want to do it.
yeah.
Unless, again, unless we've got so much free cash, we're walking around with it in our fists and we don't know what to do with it. But
But we don't necessarily have to bond it the way we have in the past.
sure, Sean.
Going forward, he hasn't finished, but there's other buildings.
I know.
The more important thing to look at, forget year one, because year one's never going to happen. It's going to get spread somewhat, but the more important thing going forward is the $6 and then $3 a square foot per year. That plus all the other buildings ends up with some number. There's some number out there that if we're not putting that every year into some stabilization fund, we're not keeping up with it.
Right.
We know we haven't kept up with it now, we haven't done it.
But that's the point of this
Just fix it
exercise
when it's
too. Yeah.
And
Now,
so we
always
might borrow
remember
to start.
always remember keeping in mind, this is best case scenario. That boiler downstairs could go tomorrow. That's an enormous expense. It's just,
But this rug could last 30 years like the last one did. So
But the point being, the forecast is
yeah.
there, whether we follow it every year or not. It'll be a year-by-year thing.
The
But
rug
no, we're
lasted-
falling behind if we're not keeping up.
The rug lasted 10 years, but we
You kept it for 30 years. Okay, so thank you. Anybody else have any questions? David, any points you want to make that haven't come out yet?
Just that, I just want to point out that this is really an input into a larger sheet where what will come to the selectmen for approval is a lot more simplified of a dollar amount with the projects to be done, much
Yep.
like the school project, the school capital plan comes to.
Yeah, but we have access to all these reports, so we
Yes.
can go through them with a fine-tooth comb.
Right, right.
And the capital plan has to include vehicles too, and our capital plan is both buildings and vehicles, moving equipment, all that kind of stuff, all have to go into the same plan so that we know that we take 300,000 for one building, we take the numbers for the 4 other buildings, and we take the numbers for all the vehicles, and then we know what our basic capital, non-emergency capital needs are each year over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then our job is, how do we fund it? There are a variety of ways to do it, borrowing, non-borrowing, putting aside some money from the operating budget each year. But the point I'm trying to make is that the 300,000 is just one component out of 5 plus all the vehicles. So the total amount is going to be a lot larger than 300,000 a year.
Also, we're taking some of these projects and incorporating them into a maintenance plan. We've only been working on town hall so that we would have those items built into the operational budgets. So some of these projects could have been avoided in the out years if they were.
It was properly maintained, we wouldn't
Yeah.
have as much of a problem.
Yeah, so we'll have a capital plan and then we'll have a operations or maintenance plan. We just need a person that could help with that. And advisory has mentioned to me that I should be looking at that, so we'll have to discuss that when we're on budget time.
Yep. Great, thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Do we have one spreadsheet that rolls each of the buildings up together, and aggregates all it together for a big look at all of the financial needs?
Yeah.
No,
I don't, yeah, that would,
these are all being put into one spreadsheet, and I do have
Oh.
those all in there.
I think so,
And they
yeah.
do roll up there with priority.
Yeah. Yeah. Very helpful. Great, thank you. We're going to move on now. If there's no more questions, we've got a reserve fund transfer request from the library. I guess it's from the selectmen.
Well, I'd like to request that we postpone that until after the update on the finance director.
Okay.
I think it's going to generate.
Thank you.
No problem.
Those two kind of go hand in hand.
Okay. Are we stuck on a particular time for this finance director update, David, or can you do
No,
it?
no, we just want, well, we have some people here that would like to participate, but maybe take care of George Fisk.
So you want to do?
I think you should go on to George Fisk.
I'm losing control of my agenda, David. But okay.
I didn't bring it up to change it.
You asked the question.
George.
That size 4 type and no lights.
It's okay. Hi, George.
Greetings.
Greetings.
You ready for me to speak, or do you
I am. Is this going to generate $300,000 in the first year so we can pay for this building?
Easy.
Okay.
We'll see how the assessors do with it.
Okay.
Well, I'm here tonight because, as I guess you know at this point, Sherborn Rural Land Foundation is intending on selling a parcel of property it owns located with frontage on Pleasant Street, Western Avenue, and a smidgen of frontage at the very end of Docking Brook Road. The parcel is about 50 acres in size. It was once, when we first acquired it, back around 1984, it was about 68 acres in size, I believe. We bought it from the Hildreth family. The Hildreth family had been in town for many generations. They owned a large farm and had actually been selling portions of it to the town over a period of time. The 68 acres we acquired was the remaining acreage of the farm. We bought it, turned around and sold about 6 acres, a small portion of which is on the other side of Pleasant Street. We sold it to Bob and Bert Delaney. Very quickly thereafter, they've subsequently taken the house down and had a replica of the original farmhouse designed and constructed there. And a few years later, they had asked to acquire a little bit more acreage, which we sold to them. So that was the remaining 50 acres that we had. It's the very first parcel that we acquired, and it's one we're proud of and have enjoyed owning. In the intervening years, as I think you're all aware, what was the Fessenden property was acquired by Jonathan and Lisa Hudson Walker, and among other things, they began Silverwood Farm, which has, again, I think been a very positive impact on the town. We are delighted to see what they've done in terms of promoting and continuing agriculture in Sherborn. And we are under a current lease arrangement with them and have been for a few years, but for a variety of reasons, they wanted to purchase the property and we actually wanted to sell it to them. What's, I think, of particular benefit to the town is that what we want to do is put an agricultural preservation restriction on the property, which will need approval by the State Department of, I can't remember, Energy and Environmental Resources, I think is the title. And it also requires signature on the part of the Board of Selectmen. We have submitted, what you've received, we've submitted to the state for their review, and I thought it was prudent to submit it to you coincident with that, so that any comment you have or they have, we can share back and forth in a timely fashion. What it does mean is the property would be protected in perpetuity, used for agricultural purposes. It means that the land trust will receive proceeds from the sale, which we can use for other activities that we have as a land trust. And what is very important to us is that we wanted to be sure that there was some reasonable means of public access continuing with the property. So we have negotiated. There actually is a portion of there is an easement now on a portion of the property that we sold to the Delaney's back in '84, or more recently, I guess, perhaps in the early '90s. And what the easement plan does is it provides public access, essentially cross-country skiing, hiking, horseback riding, that sort of thing, non-vehicular, through the property so that it connects with the Bailey Trail and other town-owned land, and also with the schoolhouse lot, if you're aware of where that is. That's on Western Avenue. It's town-owned property directly across the street from Pleasant Street. So we would continue to have public access. It would be designated as to where it would be. We have a plan. I still would call it a draft plan, but we do have a plan of what that easement would be. I've already noted something in the plan that I think needs to be adjusted, but the point being here that it's good for the land trust, it's good for Silverwood Farm, and I think it's good for the town. It does put the property back on the tax roll at a modest level, to be sure, but there would be, and I haven't tried to calculate what that would be, but there would be some tax revenue coming to the town by virtue of the fact that it's on the tax roll again.
So George, you and I had a little back and forth today on the terms of the APR, and so my question to you was where in here it actually states that that easement is reserved, and you said it's not in here, but it's in the deed. Mm-hmm. That you're the property deed to the Hudson Walkers has a clause in it that says grantor reserves an easement shown on such and such a plan. Is that the idea?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, and you'd prefer not to have it also in the APR?
We're open to putting it in the APR.
I mean, it makes sense to me just because, since we are signing it on behalf of the town, that there would be some acknowledgement in this that there was a reserved easement.
I think it's a good idea, Mike, to do that, as you suggest, and I've talked to others about it, and they agree that from my point of view, it might be easier to keep track of by having it in the APR.
I think it certainly
it's
would
a
be.
good idea.
Okay, and I also just, now that I've seen this in print, even though it's very small, I noticed one of these legs of the easement kind of peters out. Does that connect to something else, or is it really just stopping there?
That's the part that I want to see adjusted.
I see, okay.
I got the plan, and I was wondering what, it actually, if you see the hard copy, which I have, and
Yeah.
happy to show it to you, it shows where it peters out. It actually, in the plan, it's easier to read. It shows where the trail network itself continues. And I think what we need to do is show that not only the trail continues, but the easement
yes.
continues, at least to the property line. So
Yeah.
that's what I saw in the plan that I think needs to be modified.
Okay.
So my 2 cents is that I commend you for this. I think it's very much in the public interest. I think it would be approved by the Department of Agricultural Resources without any issues. It preserves the character of the town. It puts restrictions on development, which is good, but it's returning property to the tax rolls at the same time. So there is, as I read, 1,500 feet of frontage on different public ways. Those would be subject to what's known as A&R, approval not required, divisions creating all kinds of house lots and the rest. And instead, it preserves the character of the town, preserves one of the historic farms in the town. But as I say, it puts the whole thing back on the tax rolls.
Well, it's also, a credit to the Hudson Walkers, too, that they're working with you to do this and that they've got that level of commitment to that farm.
Agreed.
So
The
I commend
other
that
aspect,
and you.
yeah, thank you. The other aspect of this, which is kind of interesting, is that most APRs, where you're getting state approval, you're also getting some level of funding. And we are not looking for that from the state, and neither are the Hudson Walkers. So we're quite confident that this is going to be approved by the state.
That's great. I have one wordsmithing comment, George, and I don't know if you want me to give you that here or later, but
Later?
later, yeah.
What-
okay.
what is it?
It's just one word in paragraph 14 under privacy. I would, instead of the word but, I would use the word except, which has more of a legal
Can you-
terminology. You want me to just mark that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a quick question that perhaps Heather can answer. What's the, this will be going back on the tax roll, but as an agricultural preservation rate. What is that as a percentage of the normal tax rate? What is it about
I apologize, that's assessor or tax collector? It's not
That's
my
really an
wheelhouse.
assessor's question.
and it's what, about a quarter of the normal rate?
You know, I don't know. I know what the 61B is 25%
Right.
generally.
That's where I was.
61A are 10%.
Okay.
So I haven't taken the time to try to determine what that is. A couple of other things, now that I'm here. We are allowing, there's no plan, but we are going to allow them to construct, if they want, agricultural structures. There are a few conditions. One is that the design and location of those structures needs to be approved by the land trust. So we were concerned about the aesthetics of what a structure would be, and also the location and whether it would be, made sense for where they wanted to put it, and they've agreed to that as well. And in that instance, if they did do that, it would add to the assessed value.
And where is that in the, in this APR? I didn't,
It's 6 under paragraph B.
Great, thank
Six,
you.
Page 4.
Reserve rights. Agricultural structures.
great, thank you.
And the proceeds go back to the trust?
Yes.
So that frees up the trust to do other good deeds.
Let's hope.
Thanks, George.
So I'm not looking for your approval tonight.
Okay.
I'm looking more for comment, and we can include these and comment back to the state. And I think I'd like to do that sooner than later and
Great.
modify the plan. I just soon not leave you with a plan since it's really a progress.
We've just got the little
Oh, you
version,
got
so that's
that,
good.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
we're good.
All right.
George, thank you. It's very,
Thank you.
that was a clear presentation. This looks like from my standpoint, it looks like a great project, and you know, as Paul said, something to commend you.
Well,
your
we're
group for.
pleased. We're very pleased. Good. Thank you.
Are we all set with that? Okay. So now we do have the finance director update, David?
Sure. As you know, we're in the process of hiring a Board of Health agent, a fire chief, and a finance director accountant. The Board of Health is in charge of hiring the agent. The Selectmen appointed a selection committee for the fire chief, and I've been overseeing a finance director accountant hiring process. So I've been working with what I've been calling the town administrator's finance director accountant applicant review team. That doesn't require an appointment, it's just a group of people. That includes Mark Brandon as selectman, George Morrill, Mary Wolf, Fred Abdalahead, Heather Peck, and Grace Shepard. And we had 19 original applicants. And we had, after conducting a pre-screening, we had narrowed that down to about 10. And then we identified a group of the top 6 for interviews and did screening interviews on the remaining 4. Of the top 6, we had 2 withdraw, and leaving us with a top 4. We conducted interviews last, was it a week ago Friday? Okay. This past Friday? Yeah, it does. It seems a long time ago. And after that, we had it down to 2 people and that we were comfortable with, and one of those people withdrew earlier this week, leaving us with 1 person. So we started talking about, what steps do we do now? Do we bring 1 person in for the Board of Selectmen to interview? Do we hold off and try to repost the position at a later date? And after looking at everything, the way I would like to proceed is to recommend that the Board of Selectmen grant approval for me to repost the position at a later date for a period maybe up to 6 months, and in the meantime bring in part-time temporary accounting and finance assistants that basically I can hire and bring that person in for up to 6 months and work with us, and that will ease the amount of pressure we've had on the outside consultant that's been in. We can cut her hours back to maybe coming in 1 day a week as opposed to 3 days a week, and have that consultant just focus on the higher level items, and then have this assistance working with advisory, me in our office, in the finance office, get some exposure to things, and there's a possibility that that person actually works out and we meet as a team and bring her forward as a recommended person to move right into the finance director role without having to wait for that full 6-month period. But the worst case scenario would be reposting at the end of 6 months and going through the process again. But that gets us through the major pieces of the budget and the warrant and everything.
Is your informal advisory, what do you call it, support group? What is it? Are they on board with that approach?
I think I've discussed it with pretty much everyone. Heather, you're not nodding your head, but I did discuss it with you.
I am on board because I want to support you. I have reservations, but
Right.
we'll all work together to make it work.
Yeah,
I mean, we're on board to make it work.
Personally, I think it's
There's a lot of
best
that going
case
around.
scenario that this person's willing to come in on a part-time basis and
That I
almost
agree.
Yeah.
get a trial. We get to trial with this person and see.
Is this the
see
person
how
you were
they
gonna bring forward? This is the one you were left with?
Yes.
Is that the same person?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, I mean, it sounds like a way to get done what we need to get done.
It's a good solution.
It's the,
Because the consultant is very expensive, so to have her doing the amount of work that we need to have done this time of year
right.
is,
And if we can get somebody coming in at this time, this is a really busy time. for
It gets
advisory
everything moving
in particular.
instantly as opposed to setting up another interview with the selectmen and then deliberating and then doing an appointment after that. We can see how it goes and then bring that forward at a time that we're all comfortable with, if we get to that point.
Is the advisory group comfortable with what we're looking for, posting for? I mean, to be down to one candidate, I'll provide a brief update on the fire chief selection, which is, we've gone through a similar triage. We're down to 3 candidates who are going to come in through the assessment center, but one of the things we discussed was, you know, are we posting for the right set of skills? Are we looking for the right skills for the position?
It's a little different in this that you have the accountant, all those duties are specified in statute, and those are reflected in a local job description that we've had for a long time. It was updated a few years ago. And then the bylaw that was passed 2 years ago that details the responsibilities of the finance director. So really that job description is in the bylaw. So those are the
Did you break it?
expectations. And what?
We helped draft it, negotiate it, yes.
So David, what are you looking for from us tonight? We don't have on the agenda anything about actually hiring somebody, but it does
No.
say update, so.
Not looking for, I have the authority to hire somebody. It was more to update you on this process, to see if there was general support for us proceeding how we've talked. Or if anybody doesn't express any major concerns, that's the direction that I would go.
Well, if you're looking for a general reaction, I'm going to go with the recommendation of your support,
advisory
Whatever.
support team.
Tag team.
We've had several names. Well, that's good to know.
So I'll follow your recommendation.
Anybody else want to weigh in there?
No, I've discussed it with David. I'm also in support of it. In the business world, we've done sort of temp to perm kind of things, and they can work out. And I think particularly in this situation, where this could be a good idea, and I commend David for taking a more sort of approach and trying to reduce our expenses with consultants. So I think it's definitely something we should try to.
Okay, great.
Great, thanks, David.
All right, thanks, man.
Okay, so now we're up to, we're back to consideration of reserve fund transfer request for library project.
All right.
Who's walking us through this one?
I can start.
Okay.
The reserve fund transfer requests are usually come to the Board of Selectmen, and then you do an approval, and then it goes to the advisory committee for a second approval and signature. In your packet, there was a spreadsheet of notable reserve fund transfers. There's only been one this year, and that was for $20,000 for the housing partnership. I think there were 2.
There was another one in the beginning of the year with that.
Legal notice for, the advertising and the fire chief, yeah. So that was totally, in total, there's been $23,000 already granted. The original starting balance was like $360,000, somewhere through there. So the 2 latest requests that have come up, one is for library project audit and oversight, and that's a project where we would use the existing auditors to specifically audit the library construction project from the beginning of its inception back in July 1st, 2015 to the end of that, which would be December 31st, 2017, hopefully. And the estimate, and I have the proposal in your packet, was for $10,000 to $12,000. So the reserve fund transfer request is for $12,000. The library builder's risk policy, that's the builder's risk insurance. That's came out to $28,000. That was a process where we asked Maya to go out to the market and bring back 3 of the best proposals at different levels. And this is basically middle of the road proposal that would provide payment to the town within 5 days.
5 days.
5 days to continue operations in the event that there was some sort of work stoppage due to funding. So, and I think the amount was $750,000.
750,000.
So that's the builder's risk policy, and so I'm just bringing those requests to you, and we have,
I got a question.
sorry.
My question is, if it was run through the library construction budget, would any of these be grant reimbursable from the state? Would any percentage of this expenditure be grant reimbursable? If the answer to that is yes, aren't we better off increasing the project size so that we get the state to contribute a portion? If the answer is no, then it makes sense to do it this way, because then we don't have any hope of getting any money from the state. So the fundamental question is, would this stuff be grant eligible if it was classified as part of the project?
My understanding it was not, and that's why in the original budget it was put in as a $0 amount. And that was left the option to, for us when we put out the construction spec, to include it, require the contractor to provide the insurance, or for the town to go and get that insurance. So before we put those documents out, we met and we discussed that it would be better, we'd probably get a better price for our own insurance agent as opposed to relying on a contractor. So it wasn't required in the spec for the contractor to provide that.
So we raised at town meeting a year ago, I guess, $1 million for this project, right? Are you asking for another $40,000 on top of that million, or is this just an accounting exercise to transfer out of reserved fund $40,000 and apply it towards the $1 million that the town's already appropriated for this project?
This is a reserve fund transfer request that this money would come out of the reserve that was budgeted through regular taxation.
So it's on top of the
It's
$1 million
above
budget.
and beyond.
So I'm asking, I guess, why it is that we need to go above and beyond $1 million if we've already put $1 million of town money into a project that was going to be grant funded and privately funded.
Well, let's take them one at a time, because they're different things.
Okay.
And if we could talk about the audit oversight, this is something I asked David to get us a quote on, because there was a lot of concern about, given the state of our accounting department at the moment, we're very thin. We're about to go through a software change that there is the potential we could run into difficulties in accounting, in particular for the money that's coming from the state, which would cause obviously a lot of difficulties. And so it seemed to me that it would be a good idea to backstop our team here and provide them with a resource, using our auditors to come in once a month and make sure that we are doing this kind of properly, we are satisfying the state's needs, and that for the $3.5 million, 10 to 12 is a pretty small amount to pay.
I think I look at this piece as similar to when the treasurer had retired and we ordered an outside auditor to come in and do closeout from one treasurer to the other. And I think I would recommend that this get done, and it's on a lot of projects it's standard that you would have an outside person be looking at this instead of the people running it in the office and wait a year until it gets audited.
So that argument makes sense for the town's portion of the total 3.4 million. I mean, it has a benefit both to us and to the library as well. The risk policy, do you make the same argument for that?
I don't know anything about the risk policy.
When you say the town's portion of the 3.4 million, what do you mean, Chuck?
Well, if we're concerned about the accounting and it being treated properly, the
Yeah.
town's approved $1 million, we want to make sure it gets allocated properly. That $12,000 is the town spending money to be sure that the accounting is done properly. It also applies to the $2.4 million.
It's on the entire $7 or $8 million project,
Right.
which is, we don't do a lot of these.
Right.
So,
I think
It also
substantively
came up
it's a
in
good
last
idea.
year's
I mean, my objection and questioning is how we pay for it, because we have a project, we had a project budget, we went to town meeting, the representation was made to the town meeting, this is what it's going to cost the town for this project, and this is now sort of a backdoor way of getting another $40,000 into this project. And I'm not saying that with any, malign intent. I know everybody's acting in good faith. I just think we have a responsibility to the town meeting and to the taxpayers that if we stand up in front of the town and say the town share of this project is $1 million, the town share should be $1 million unless and until town meeting says, no, it's okay to spend more. So I would be against both of these coming out of the transfer, but I'm not against either one of them because I know we need them. I do think builder's risk is more typically something that the contractor would buy. And, maybe there's a way to have the contract pay for it, but still have the town's insurance quote pass through, yeah.
I would have to disagree with you on the auditor piece of that, because I think this is a function that should exist here and doesn't because of the situation that we're in. And so, the fact that we have to go out and buy it, I think, is basically due to us and not necessarily due to Wyman.
Yeah, and that rationale is something within our control. That I don't disagree with that. I think that's a benefit to the town. I have trouble coming up with an argument for the risk policy being included.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So at town meeting, and I don't have the vote in front of me, but and you guys can pipe in, but I think we approved the total project amount
We did.
with the caveat that the town would raise or borrow up to $1 million. But as a town, we actually approved the total thing. So my question is, are we potentially on the hook if we don't qualify for grant monies coming up with those additional monies because we approved the total project amount? That's my question, which sort of leads into what Mark is saying is we have a very vested interest in ensuring that we do these audits and ensure that we qualify for all of those grants so that we don't end up on the hook for another $750,000. So my question leads into maybe part of your discussion about the value of that audit expense.
And I think Mary can speak to what has happened in other towns.
Yeah, Elizabeth mentioned that to me, which is why.
Yeah, I mean, it came up at our last board meeting, just in terms of recognizing the transition and the organizational change in the finance office. And, worrying about the scale of this project and $8 million kind of coming in and going out of town hall. And, we coordinated with Heather, we coordinated with Suzanne, we coordinated with David, but we're a small town. We don't have that standing building committee. We don't have that standing, set of project managers who would help usher a big project like this through. So we raised it as a concern, and I think also in line with just looking at the endowment accounts and the trust funds for the library. I think it's a very good practice for us to have that kind of extra third-party oversight.
Is this an ongoing contract? Because I was reading this as a one-shot deal, just like David said at the time the treasurer left. There was an audit, and then when David took the treasurer's position, the books were closed and then the books were reopened.
Well, the scope, it would be to the closeout with the estimated closing date of December 31st.
So how does that protect you in the way that Heather was
come in
talking
on a
about?
quarterly basis and make sure everything's reconciled.
So it's not at the end. It's on an ongoing basis.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry.
And if this is part of the sort of part of the makeup for the fact that we don't have accounting help. We have a budget for an accountant in town, right? We have a budget for an accountant finance director. You've been kind of patching things together with a temporary person. Now we're talking about another person who's a attempt to hire maybe, or interim. Is there something else? This is a pretty specific request on behalf of a specific project, but are there a menu of services that we ought to be thinking about in terms of transferring funds for the accounting finance director function, because we've had to go outside for different things?
I still am optimistic that I can make things happen with the existing budget that was approved. we may need some transfers at the end between salary and expenses, but I think, I don't see needing a reserve fund transfer for the department yet, unless we were to decide that I should go ahead and call this a departmental expense and deal with it at the year end, and come back.
So from how Mark explained it, it certainly sounds like that would be one way to do it. The other question I had was, this is a sole source procurement. I know you don't have to go through the Procurement Act. I know Melanson Heath is our town accountants, but there are other accounting firms out there who presumably are capable of doing this. And did you go look for a second bid on this?
No, I didn't.
Is there any reason not to look for a second bid on this?
No.
Are they gonna do our general audit?
No.
This is not a general audit.
No,
This is
I
a
know, but
very-
you wouldn't, you're duplicating efforts if you're gonna pay somebody else to dive into your books when they're already diving into your books. They're the ones that and I'm sure this is where this came from. They identified this as an issue last year.
Right.
A huge issue.
Right.
But I mean, it doesn't hurt to you can get another quote like that.
This is diving into the books in a very limited sense because it's related to a particular project. I mean,
It also
that's-
has an end date. I mean, this proposal has an end date of December 31st, 2017.
Right.
So that's what we're bodying.
Yeah, I think any other municipal auditing firms could give you a quote very quickly, just so
Yeah.
that we know that it's this is a fair quote. I'm basing my judgment on what we paid for the treasurer closeouts, which were, I think it was $6,000.
Mhm.
So I was just looking at the value of that compared to this on a large project.
It's a much bigger project than that, yeah.
Much
Just to
bigger.
follow up on what Chuck said, is the project going to be done by December 2017?
January 2018.
So then this proposal should be revised to reflect the
be
extended outer date.
We've changed the date a couple of times. They're okay with the date. We just need to make
Yeah.
sure we get it ready.
Good point.
Chuck, you got something?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Mayor, yes.
Can I just add, there have been examples of other towns where the reimbursable expenses from the grant have not been paid because they were not classified correctly or not processed properly. And so that would be, one risk mitigator for having this in place is that, that.
Are you, Rick,
Again,
are we hearing this or not? Is
No.
it coming up? So Mary, do you mind going to the microphone? and-
No, I'm hearing it, I just want to know who's ringing.
This one keeps beeping.
Hold on.
I just think it's a prudent decision because 3.6 million is coming back to us from the state in the form of the MBLC grant. And that's an awful lot of little pieces to process through, and if even 15 or 20 grand of that isn't eligible, we might end up losing it. So I think it's.
I don't think anybody at this table thinks that it's not a good project. It's really a question about how you fund it.
Right.
And all, everything you said makes perfect sense.
I'm completely fine paying for it out of the finance office.
It's just that at the end of the year, you're going to come back for a reserve fund transfer for other
He is
finance-related expenses, right?
Well, it may be a transfer from reserve, or it could be a transfer from another department that's
Yeah.
already, been appropriated.
Well, I don't know, what do people want to do? We can take these separately.
I'm in favor of that. Well, we are taking them separately.
Right.
And
So
it seemed like Mark's pitch was almost that.
I'll move to approve a reserve fund transfer for $12,000 to fund the library project audit and oversight.
Second.
Second.
Okay, so moved and second, any more discussion?
Yeah, I thought we were going to go towards trying to put it into the budget.
That's what I thought.
Well, that's what I prefer to do, but it doesn't sound
Which would
like.
be counter to that.
It's 6 and 1, half dozen the other.
Yeah,
The only-
exactly. I'm
Well, if you
comfortable
can
with
find
this.
it, and
The only
It's
benefit,
there right now.
the only benefit to waiting is we don't take that 12 out of the reserve fund transfer right now, and they would just hold it as an earmark. And then at the end of the year, we either do a transfer from another budget, or there could be 10 grand sitting in something within the finance budget. And it's just, the town account just does a simple transfer.
Or
It
we
doesn't
do a
even go-
reserve fund transfer. Yeah.
Again,
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
to Mark's point is, it should be a function that's,
That's-
under
that's
different
very
circumstances, it would have been held,
Right.
maybe we wouldn't have needed from an outside source. We do, it should be part of that budget. And if we overrun that budget, it's because we're hiring consultants all year, and we should talk about that.
Yeah, I agree with that, George.
Just from advisory standpoint, we always would rather hold the reserve fund transfer still later in the year and use the budget for an item like this along the way.
So you already had a discussion of approval of the,
Do I amend it?
So would you entertain a friendly amendment?
Certainly.
And it would be to fund it through the department at this point.
Okay. So it's been
So
as
I'll
amended.
second the friendly amendment.
Second the amended. Okay, all in favor as amended? All right, great, thank you. Thanks for working with us on that one. And then the other is the builder's risk.
I accept the rationale for the audit being a town function. I would just have the contractor do it. I think your argument, Mike, is very persuasive. We presented $1 million budget to the town. This makes it, in my view, $1,028,695.
Yeah.
So I don't support this as a reserve fund transfer.
So we want to make a motion?
Well, I would support it as a town expenditure for a couple of reasons. First, I don't think the library people would be asking for it unless they felt it was needed and that they didn't have the resources to do it. Number two, it's a precaution that's not required. Number three, they said it was not grant eligible for reimbursement. Number four, I think at the end of the day, it protects us in ways that, if you look at the policy, there's equipment failures and there's natural events and all kinds of things that could disrupt the policy, disrupt the project. We don't have this kind of insurance. I think there's going to be a risk for the taxpayers. My sense is if we say no, there will be no insurance, and therefore...
That'd be irresponsible if there was no insurance.
Right. I don't...
I mean, this is a typical expense for any kind of construction project. You would get builder's risk insurance, particularly something of this size.
But he said we didn't include it in the specs.
I don't know why we didn't include it in the specs.
But whether that was a right decision or a wrong decision, this is where we're starting from. The contractor, in fact, was not required to have this insurance and doesn't have the insurance. So the question is then, do we go without it or do we go with the insurance?
I mean, my question for Mary would be, would you put the town at risk by not having builder's risk insurance if it wasn't funded by a reserve fund transfer?
No, I don't think I would, but I'm saying right now that, I didn't know what builder's risk was until 2 weeks ago when we started talking about this, and I do now know what it is, and we need it for the project, and we need to figure out how to fund it. And we've already put 1.25 extra million from the endowment funds into the project because of all the escalation costs, and we don't have any more money. So, I mean, if we have to, we'll figure it out, but I talked with the OPM today and asked why wasn't this flagged? Why didn't someone talk about this before 2 weeks ago? And his response was that, and this is lessons learned, 20/20 hindsight, but in a larger town with a standing building committee, this would have been standard part of the conversation. I looked back through the LBC minutes from a year and a half. There was nothing where we talked about it. So it just kind of flew under the radar. Nobody mentioned it. I asked the chair of the LBC why it wasn't talked about, and he said, I think we just missed it. So I think it was...
I don't want to fault the building committee as missing something.
I thought you hired somebody recently as a project manager, though.
Well, we've had him on board the whole time,
Okay.
but the conversation with him today was, in a larger town, this just goes under the insurance premium. So I think, at a town like Framingham or,
Could that happen? This couldn't just get integrated into our insurance that we already have?
Pay it out of the insurance line? If you vote to do it, yeah.
Ask them to put this rider on our insurance for all the buildings.
No, it's a separate policy.
It's a builder's risk policy, so it's...
And you actually will get a credit. I think she said, the rep said it was $3,500 credit against what you've already paid for the library protection. So I think it's whatever, David, the quote is minus the $3,500.
So fund it out of the insurance line? Be happy to do that.
We'll look for it.
Adrian said that.
We'll look for it, I
Yeah.
don't remember seeing.
I mean, think what she said is there's roughly $3,500 of monies that the town is paying to insure the building as is. When you put the building's risk insurance
Also,
policy in place,
the
you'll get credit
insurance
for
will
that.
normally pay.
Right.
Okay, I'll have to look at
Anyone
this.
have any idea how we paid for the CM&D garage? I don't remember it. I was on the committee. I don't remember ever talking about it.
I think the builder was asked to provide his own, and he did.
Okay.
So the, okay, I see this is not a price, this is a number. Got it. It's a $28,000 item. What do we have in our insurance line?
Because it's a department, at the end of the year, under the Municipal Relief Act, the town accountant could probably transfer from, I think, from health insurance or property insurance line to cover it if there was money in those.
But this is
those
property
lines.
insurance in effect.
Yeah. So, but in that insurance line, there's more than just what was budgeted for property insurance.
I don't want to leave the town at risk with a major project. This is one of the biggest projects that we've been undertaking. And there's $8 million flying around, or maybe more, depending on how the costs escalate. And this insurance, $28,000 with a $3,500 credit back, is really small potatoes, given the enormity of the risk. Given the fact that it's not there, given the fact that unless we do something, my suspicion is it's not going to get in place correctly. Or if they have to scramble and do funding, then there's going to be one feature that's going to be taken out of the library that they were planning on because they don't have the money, is the sense I
But
have.
Paul, if the costs are escalating, that's what you have to do with a project. If the costs are escalating, you don't have enough money, then you have to take a feature out that you can't have because you don't have enough money. It's not a bottomless pit of money for the library. It's a great project. The town supports it. The town supported it with money. The town supported it with donations. The town supported it with tons of hard work by lots of people, and we want it to be a success. But if we can avoid a reserve fund transfer because we can pay it out of the current insurance budget.
Oh yeah, oh
or,
sure, I don't care.
Or if we can't do that, then we can go to town meeting next spring and ask the town if they want to fund it, and if they can't fund it, then it goes out of the library budget. I mean, that's how I would see doing it. It's got to be bought now, but it's in place,
I'm
and there'll be
agreeable.
some
That's-
transfers.
That's fine.
Okay,
I'll make that motion.
great.
Can I ask something? Is there a preference on whether that we provided or the contractor?
Well, you explained to us at the beginning, remember, that it's more expensive if the contractor provides
Typically,
it?
it would be, and
Okay.
you'd have
All right,
less
so I'm
control.
listening to you on this one.
Okay.
And it's already gone out
He's
to
gonna
bid.
follow your
You really don't
advice.
want to add that to the
Well, the
bid.
spec would be out there, and you'd have to issue an addendum, and
Yeah.
they
You pay money for addendums.
Yeah.
It's just they're going to go
It's
out.
more complicated. You don't have to.
Let's just do it.
Okay.
Fred,
Just a quick one. We tried negotiating a 50-50 split with the contractor.
it doesn't really matter because he's just going to bill us.
You're still going to have to do an addendum, and you're going to pay money for the addendum.
And they're saying it's not reversible anyway, so.
And the bid for the general contractor is out right now, and we're opening them on the 22nd. So the construction documents have been
Yeah.
I mean, you could issue
Okay.
the addendum, they're going to get a quote, and they're just going to slap it on there. There's no negotiation or anything.
Right.
Okay.
And it's kind of last minute. I'm going to move that we pay for it out of the insurance budget.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. All right, thank you. Saved you guys a couple of votes there. All right. Okay. And thank
Hope you
you.
agree.
Mayor, I hope you understand it's not, this is
We'll remind you of
support
it.
for the project, it's just the mechanism.
Gotten so thin over the past
Okay, all right. Thank you, though.
very much.
And George, we will remind you of that later.
Okay, we are,
Does that policy include work stoppages due to street closures?
Don't.
oh, that was a huge rider. We couldn't afford that,
That's
Judge.
why Mike couldn't get here on time today.
Let's see, operational items, this is more general hiring update stuff. Chuck gave us a little bit of an update before.
Yeah, real briefly, we had about 27, 28 applicants, reviewed the resumes, reduced it to about 9 or 10. Most were still interested. We interviewed, I should have brought the numbers in front of me, 7 or 8. We have 3 leading candidates that are going to go through the triage with the other fire chiefs, and our intent is to, assuming that they pass that review step, to have at least 2 preferably 3 candidates for the board to interview.
Okay.
And the assessment is going to be done in the first 7-8 days of December, so
Great.
right after Thanksgiving.
Okay, that's great. Anything on the Board of Health? Do you know what they're doing, David, with the agent?
They were planning on conducting, or they posted to conduct some interviews in executive session, which they couldn't do, so they were kind of canceled. And
They couldn't do what?
because they need to be open session interviews.
I guess.
So we had to reschedule them, and then they had one person withdraw because they didn't want to participate in the public session interview.
Okay.
So
Why are they required to do them in open session? For job
Open
interviews?
meeting law.
But they did,
we have,
they conducted one interview. The night two were supposed to show, one did, in open session.
In open session.
Their last meeting.
yeah, so the one had withdrawn, so they're down to 3 as well.
Okay. All right. So, and do they have a process conclusion date on that, do you think, or?
Yeah, I think we're within 2 meetings. I would think at their second meeting, but I just don't know the date.
Okay.
Their next meeting, they'll conduct the interviews then.
That's good.
Follow
The temporary contract is up, right?
There was no temporary contract. There was when we converted the contractor's contract to an employee, there was an offer letter for a part-time temporary health agent for a period up to 6 months, which expired November 5th.
Okay.
So on that
So what has
date-
happened? Because they're telling the public that they have no idea what's going to happen.
No, well, they do know, because I have it in writing that I've told them what needs to be done, and they've done it. So the health agents right now are operating as supplemental part-time help, just like Ethan Mascoop was brought in as supplemental part-time help. The other agent is supplemental part-time help. So until they resolve this and can make an actual appointment to the full-time position, they're going to have to remain as supplemental part-time help. So
Every time this issue comes up, I want to reiterate the same thing that I've said every time, which is very much want somebody who's going to be here during business hours, responsive to the needs of builders and property owners. And builders like to work during the day, and property owners should be available during business hours, not just for the convenience of the Board of Health agent, but sometimes you need to coordinate with the building inspector and with other departments who would be here during business hours.
but you just gave a qualitative evaluation of what success is, but if you could be more specific on exactly what you would expect for in-house office hours available to the public, we could give that to the board, because right now I think they've approved 2 hours of office hours.
For an entire week?
Yeah. Those are the 2 hours that the public knows that the agent is going to be in the office that they can come in for. Otherwise, they would have to contact them and then make some other appointment. That doesn't, but it would be outside of the regular office hours.
No, I would think that they ought to be here at least like 8 in the morning till 4 closing time on a day somewhere. Or take that, so I'd be recommending more like 8 hours.
That affects at least 6 different positions. If we'd be looking for 8 hours in one day.
What do you mean?
Well, for those other positions, conservation agent, building commissioner, planner, they're all working their hours spread out through the week at different times.
Well, I don't think Paul said it had to be 8 consecutive hours on one particular day. If he did, I'm not sure that would be, 8 hours in a week would be super,
Fine.
right?
Right.
If it's in 2-hour blocks.
Yeah, and if most of
Henry certainly doesn't
if
do
most
it.
of it's between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. too. I mean, that's the other thing.
So what I can do is express that.
One thing I've heard from a lot of builders in town is the building inspector has these hours from 6 to 8 that they know is available or something like that in the morning, and they love it. Because
It's
that's when
awesome.
builders can come in, get
Well,
things done.
Morning and afternoon
Right.
with this particular inspector.
Thanks for bringing that up.
You don't get them in the morning, you get them at night.
I've heard great
It's a
things
pretty
from
common
others
building
about
inspector.
building inspectors.
Trick.
What?
6 to
Yeah, when you're not the
6:30
big
in the
town.
morning and then 3 in the afternoon.
Yeah, that's what the small towns get, because
The
it's all
building
part-time.
commissioner does have Saturday hours too.
Saturday morning.
I agree completely with Paul. I think 8 hours spread out during the week is going to give you more flexibility, whether it's 2 hours a day, 4 days a week, 4 hours one day, 2 hours 2 other days. But the idea of 2 hours a week is a non-starter.
I increased that by 100% because it was 1 hour. So it's been increased to 2
It
hours.
was 1 hour?
Yeah. So
What is that?
if the board, I don't know if you want to vote, or I can just send a letter to him saying it was discussed by the Board of Selectmen and an appropriate
We strongly
recommendation.
urge.
Well, I'll make that into a motion so that it's a commitment from the board, which would be that maybe, Sean, you should phrase the motion that the health agent should be available in town
Is this
hall.
Sean phrasing it or are you phrasing it? No, go ahead. I like the way you were phrasing it.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I want to hesitate before we phrase it, because I know there's unintended consequences, because the second we do that, we said it's for the Board of Health agent, but it's the electrical inspector, it's the plumbing inspector, it's the building inspector, it's conservation agents. Albeit, there may not be the same issue or demands on any of them.
I've never heard of an electrical inspector with regular
Well,
office hours, but
Heard griping about it when we said the health inspector should be here, that the other inspectors aren't. And I think there are different circumstances, and I want to make that point. If anyone has had any trouble ever getting a hold of Henry, the building inspector, since he started, send me an email, because I can assure you he is the most accessible municipal employee I've ever dealt with. And I don't think it's just me. I've heard from other people that that's the case. He doesn't have middle of the day office hours, but he deals with contractors mostly. And I know he's responsive to homeowners.
Well, can't we limit this just to the health
I think we
agent?
should.
yeah.
If there isn't an applicant before him, he can do the paperwork
Well-
here, not at home, not in his car,
Agreed.
not in McDonald's, but here. Somebody walks in, he's available.
Well, I've never permitted anything in this town, but would it make sense to ask them to mirror the building inspector's hours?
No. Because it's totally different. Health inspectors have to be available during the day. There's open trench issues. They're dealing with excavators that have those are very timely inspections. Not that the building inspector doesn't have that, but like Mike said, that in the smaller towns, it's very common that the contractors, both with building inspectors, electrical inspectors, they're always part-time because they work for a Framingham or a Newton or somewhere else. So they split it and they do morning and afternoon. It's actually very convenient.
I guess I'm sensitive to Sean's concern about unintended consequences and sort of trying to come up with something on the fly here.
Right now, the schedule is you have one health agent that is in every Wednesday, all day. That's Ethan Mascoop,
Right.
who's the supplemental help. Mark Orm was the part-time temporary, who is now supplemental part-time help. I don't know his exact hours, but he has the 2 office hours, and then there's anticipated work within Sherborn. Like if he has to do a perk test or something, he has to schedule that during the day, obviously. And we have them allocating on their timesheet what's office hours, what's available to the public office hours, what's field work, and what's any other, and they have to describe what those other towns are. So they are accounting for the time right now. But what you're going to be doing with this is stating some sort of expectation for that one position when they finally hire it, as the Board of Health agent, the regular part-time position.
I'm not sure.
In general terms.
Yeah, Yeah.
I mean, 2 hours a week is like Soviet Union.
I mean, isn't the principle the thing that there should be at least X number of hours, whether it's, I don't know what the budget calls for, but if there's 8 hours of office hours a week and another 8 hours in the field or whatever it is, that you'd expect ordinarily there to be X number of hours, and that those hours would ordinarily or be scheduled for routine office hours between 8 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon, at least 2 different days a week or something like that.
Yeah, and I also want to note, I mean, there is a Board of Health administrator that's a
Yeah.
full-time position during the day that does take calls and they field the call to the health agent or an email, and then the health agent would give a call back either to the office or the individual. So they're trying. Right now, they're trying to piece something together, and hopefully, it gets resolved as soon as they.
Do other towns have as much trouble as we do with piecing together a health agent position?
Well, that's why I think we need a vote. I'm concerned.
We've asked Dover what they do. They have 2 separate inspectors.
Yeah.
They have somebody who does.
Wells and then second.
Yeah. And so they have, but they said it runs very smoothly. They also have half the budget that we have.
Yeah.
For their administrative,
Yeah.
for their clerical.
Right.
The fact
Their
is,
health clerical person is also, I think, their conservation or planning clerical person too, I believe.
But
I don't know.
I know their Board of Health has half our budget. And the other thing a lot of other towns do, from what I understand, is they have a health administrator where it's, the structure is a lot different, where they have somebody, the full-time person can also do inspections. Or, they're like a
They'll call it a health director,
health director, right?
and that person will do both administrative work and inspection.
And then they'll have a lower end, maybe like an assistant in the office, not, so.
The money is there in the budget to have
Right, where
that
it could be
kind of
completely
structure.
Could be restructured.
Right.
The department could be completely restructured rather than trying to fill this part-time agent. But
You guys have the budget, whip, so.
Well, to some extent, I mean, we have
Try.
to fund the services, so the services have to be there. So we
and
can't
we
say,
get called,
we're
we
not
got called out
going
at
to
town
fund.
meetings for saying maybe we should be giving them more money. So.
Yeah.
the fact is, we wouldn't be discussing this if they were servicing the community with their inspectors. And we, at least I know for a fact they're not. They're
I
holding
can
up
say-
projects, they're holding up inspections, they're not getting to inspections. I get emails nearly every day. It's not always from the same person, but there's plenty of people out there that can't get an answer out of the Board of Health. For 2 weeks at least, the Board of Health wouldn't schedule anything because they didn't know what was going to happen on the 5th. So instead of just calling David and saying, are we going to have somebody? They didn't do that. They just told the residents, sit on it.
So this is a hiring update, so we can't get into, the details, I think.
Well, then we shouldn't be making a motion or anything because they're not going to act on it anyway. We can tell them they should be there for 40 hours a week and it's not going to happen. We've done this over and over again.
That's a good point, but it's nice also to put the expectation out there on record. I mean, I think the expectation's been communicated.
The expectation is the Board of Health would do their duty and do inspections on open septic systems, and they're not doing that.
Yeah,
We shouldn't have to make a
I'm
motion.
kind of mindful that this discussion has warped a little bit from the original intent and what's on the agenda, which says hiring updates. And my question, which was where does the Board of Health stand with their hiring, has kind of gotten into a general discussion of
They're down to 3.
Board of Health policy. And I realize being down to 3, part of that has to do with hours, but maybe we should hold off on the hours.
And what they're doing
Critique
right
a
now,
little
they're
bit.
piecing things together with two agents.
Okay.
Can you, well, you can't.
Okay.
I think it's certainly accurate to pass on the sense of this board that 2 hours of regularly scheduled office time doesn't cut it.
As they decide on hiring somebody, make sure there's somebody who can show up for more than 2 hours of regular office time.
Preferably 4 to 8 hours a week. I don't know what the budget numbers are, but I mean, 2 hours is just, seems ludicrous is the word that comes to my mind.
The position's budgeted at 15 hours.
So 8 hours a
So
week?
8 hours a week is
Or 6
reasonable.
hours a week is probably, but that's for them to decide, but as they're interviewing people, it would be helpful to know that you've got people who can actually fulfill a regular schedule during the daytime.
They have a meeting posted for next Wednesday.
Okay.
And at they are interviewing one of the candidates at 7:50 p.m.
All right, great.
I would add my voice to the notion that 2 hours a week is not sufficient. So while there's no formal motion, I think that all of us have said what we think. 2 hours a week doesn't cut it in terms of service to the community.
Okay. Great. Any selectmen reports?
Communicated from right
Smoke signals.
now. What?
No communicated smoke signals.
Did that law pass?
All right, go ahead.
No, we need that.
Go ahead. Any selectmen reports? No. Okay. Next meeting we have on the calendar is 11/16 at the advisory budget maker meeting. That's changed.
I can tell you what happened.
Okay.
We were planning on presenting guidance on that night,
Right.
but we still have some open items, and Suzanne is not back until next week. So we felt it was going to be too close to finalize everything with her only getting back on Monday. So we want to push our budget presentation to the 30th, because the following week's Thanksgiving. So what we're doing for guidance this year, rather than just sending a letter, last year we had a lot of people come in, present to us and say, we didn't understand what you meant when you switched to trend budgeting. So this year we're inviting all the budget makers in to present them guidance along with the letter and say, this is what we're expecting.
And what time is that scheduled for?
7 o'clock on November 30th.
So what's our meeting before then?
22nd.
The 22nd. Okay, so our next meeting then is November 22nd at 6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Yep.
So then we're
November
gonna
16th
add
we
the
just
30th.
canceled. Is what? Well, we got too much stuff on it already?
Well, because we had a public records request for the release of the...
Oh, this tonight we're doing the public records? Okay, so we'll meet the 16th, probably a little more briefly.
We could meet just to go into executive session and review those minutes.
Okay, all right, yep. Is everybody,
I won't be able to attend, but you can.
So you're,
we'll miss you, Mark.
what missing? You have a meeting on the 16th, we have a meeting on the 22nd, we have a meeting on the 30th.
We always had a meeting on the 16th and the 22nd. We just added the 30th. We thought we were going to be able to get rid of the 16th, and Diane is our taskmaster, and she tells us we can't do that.
Why not get rid of the 22nd?
I thought we had things on the 22nd.
Have a full meeting on the 16th and the 30th. Let's skip the 22nd, it's close to the...
Well, the 30th won't really be our meeting, right?
You would have an hour
We have an hour
before
before
they
the
start,
advisory.
or you can start
And we
at
expect
5:30.
Dolly to be advisory meeting too.
We invited the schools, just so you know.
All right,
I think
so,
we've been trying to dominate the meetings forever.
well, I think that's the question, Paul. Is it practical really to have a full meeting on the, we can't have it on the 30th when we're there, so the 16th has no advisory.
And Mark can't be there
And I
anyway.
can't make the 30th either, so.
Okay, Mark can't make the 30th. All right, so I guess we're meeting at the 16th at 6 o'clock, and Diane will tell us what our agenda is, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
And we're going to remember this too.
All right, and we're meeting the 22nd, and we're going to have to stop early because Paul has to whip the potatoes for Thursday, and then we're meeting on the 30th. Okay.
Chase a turkey.
That's it. Okay, so we now have I'm going to make a motion to go into executive session. Diane, do we have anything else we need to do before we go into executive session?
No, I don't think we're going to about 8:30 though.
We can't go.
I don't think everybody's here because
Oh, yes.
We were notified 8:30 that it was going to be a joint executive
Gotcha.
session.
So we're gonna take a break then for 20 minutes. That's a good point. We'll take a break.
I was trying to guess what time we were going and I came up with 8:30.
You want to mention?
All right, so Rick, just so you know what's happening and you can decide whether you need to tape this, it's 12 after 8 now. At about 8:28, we're going to come back and we're going to make a motion to go into executive session with the Conservation Commission. Between now and then, we don't have anything to do, so we're going to shut off the mics unless Paul...
I can report that on my screen here, the Associated Press has decided to call the state of Arizona for Donald Trump. Finally.
Thank you, Paul.
They still
Needed to do that before we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Blitzer.
I could sleep
How are
tonight.
the Bruins doing?
They still haven't called the state of
Hold on, we still have,
We're coming back at 8:28 for a motion to go into executive session once the Concom gets here.
The minute reviews.
We have some, we only have a certain
Stop now.
portion.
Stopping now.
I got it.
well, do you need a motion to adjourn? Are we
We're not adjourning. We're just temporarily stopping until 8:28 because we have an 8:30 executive session. Okay. Conservation people are out in the swamps doing something, and they're going to come here at 8:30.
draining the swamp.
They're draining the swamp. They're filling it back up again.
They're trying to find any.
Just, I got all befuddled when Paul talked about Arizona. All right, great, thank you. I move the board enter into the executive session for the following two reasons. First, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the town's litigating position, and the chair so declares pursuant to Chapter 38, Section 21A3, with respect to the following pending case, Conservation Commission versus the Fields of Sherborn. Second, to comply with or act under authority of General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 22, to review minutes of executive sessions pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A7. And just as a note, we will go into executive session on the second item, and we will wait until 8:30 before we start the litigation discussion, because that's a joint session with the Conservation Commission.
Leave for the first item.
No, we're going to go to our secret executive session room before that. Okay. But we're premature here because we still need a vote on this. So I'm going to declare that the second discussion of both items in an open meeting would be detrimental to the town's position. I need a second, and Mr. Colleen seconded, and now a roll call vote. Mr. Durensis.
Durensis votes aye.
Mr. Yan. Mr. Colleen.
Yes.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
And Mr. Jimo is yes. Having passed by a vote of 5-0, the open session is now closed. We will not be returning to open session. We are now in executive session. Okay, great. Thank you.